now. So welcome to our session, which is all about philosophy and the environment and thinking about our planet, as it says on the screen. So I'm going to hand over to our wonderful guest, Amber, who's going to lead our session.
Hiya. So yeah, my name is Amber. I study philosophy, and today I'm going to talk a bit about thinking about our planet. So this presentation is inspired by one of my favorite philosophers, Mary Midgley. So a lot of this stuff is kind of based on her ideas. But Midgley thinks that philosophers really ought to be trying to think about things that are super important for us moving forward as human beings. And one of the big things that we probably ought to be thinking about right about now is our planet. Are we thinking about it in the best way we could possibly be thinking about it? And so that's one of the questions that Mary Midgley is really interested in, and we're going to have a little think about today. So I'll skip past this one. So over the next few slides, we'll take a look at some cool pictures that I found of different artistic representations of our planet. And so when we're going through them, I think it's useful to think about how did the image make you think or feel, whether or not you've learned something by looking at it, and if you think it's a good representation of our planet. So those are the three things to keep in mind as we have a quick look. So I hope you guys have got lots of opinions. So this is the first image, which I quite like. Does anyone have anything they would like to share about how it makes you think about a planet, how you feel when you look at it, whether or not it teaches you something new? Well, I will share my own personal thoughts on it then. So personally, when I look at this picture, it definitely makes me feel kind of calm and peaceful. Also, can everyone see the picture, just to be clear? Yeah, cool. So yeah, this picture makes me feel a little like calm and peaceful. It also kind of makes us think that our planet might be like a tree. I think that's a kind of interesting comparison, maybe an interesting analogy to draw. What do you guys think about the planet being like a tree? Does that seem right to you? Does that seem really silly? Fair enough.
So we've got some comments in the chat, Amber.
Oh, I didn't see them. Sorry.
I'm not sure if the other if some of the people here can't.
Oh, lovely. It makes you think about how much water we have. That's definitely true. That's definitely true. Does it make you think that maybe we should be a bit more careful with our water?
It makes Tom think about how much water we've got and how little land there is.
Oh, I see.
And that we might be losing land if the water rises.
That's interesting. I hadn't seen that from that one. That's a really cool point. I like that it made you think of that. Does anyone think there's maybe anything wrong with this picture, that is maybe not a very good representation of our planet?
Yeah, I think it's a bit weird, partly because it's just all one way up with the Earth having a root, and it's not like that. It's sort of in space, and there's no one way up and one important end and one less important end, and that sort of thing.
Yes, no, exactly. I think that's spot on. Exactly. It doesn't really have roots like that. It's not rooted in the sky. Okay, let's have a look at this one maybe. Let's see what your thoughts are about this. I thought this was quite an interesting one, in terms of, I think to me it looks like those are all broadband cables and it's meant to be like chipboards. So it's kind of, I don't know, maybe making us think about how the planet is connected on the internet, or maybe saying that we're covering the planet in internet cables. Maybe that's a bad thing.
I thought it was knitting wool at one point, but that also kind of connects things together.
It sort of is.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether this one makes me feel optimistic that we're connected by the internet, or whether it makes me feel pessimistic that there's this much plastic cabling connecting us.
In that
Fred
respect,
had an interesting concept. Fred felt that it was representing gravity pulling things down to Earth. That the sort of the wires were pulling things into the Earth. That's how Fred feels about that picture.
That's cool.
It's lost the Antarctic.
I like the idea that it represents everything, pulling everything down to earth. I think that's an important thing that we forget sometimes. It's nice that like reminded you of that also. Okay, then there are two last ones. Both of them are a little bit strange in my opinion, but I think there's lots to look at in both of them. This one I'm particularly intrigued by. I'm not really sure what to make of the hands. Anyone got any ideas on that one?
It's making Fred think about the food stores that we have on Earth and how the Earth feeds us.
Oh, wonderful. That's really cool. Yes. Could you say more about how you think it shows that the Earth feeds us?
Go on, Fred. Go on, Fred.
Because because the baby's trying to eat the one with hugging Earth, and secondly because it's kind of cold up in the Earth.
Yes, brilliant. Exactly that. That's very good. I think you're really right about it showing how the Earth really supports us. That's great. Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts about these pictures in particular? Does anyone think they learned something by looking at them?
I think the baby looks that's sort of feeding from the planet. It looks like it's drained away all of the sort of nutrients of the Earth near where it's feeding from, like we're parasites. That's how I view that picture.
I can definitely see that. Amazing. Does anyone have a favorite of the ones that we've seen so far? And if so, would they be interested in sharing why that's their favorite? I'll just remind you of them again.
Tom likes the tree because it shows how peaceful things can be.
I like that one too. That's my favorite too for that reason. I think it's optimistic. Anyone else?
I quite like the one with the cables because I'm a geek. It sort of showed how we're increasingly getting connected, which might reduce the need for travel.
Yes.
I like the one with the cables because I think that it shows connection, but also like a bit that we could be trapped by those cables underneath those cables.
Yeah, I like that. Amazing. Great. So realistically, the answer that we would love to have as philosophers is, well, what makes a good picture of our planet? Wouldn't it be great if we could have a nice, clean, simple answer of this is definitely the best way to look at our planet and the best kind of picture of our planet? But as we kind of seen from the pictures that we've looked at before, it's not really the case that one picture would necessarily do, but lots of them show us lots of different things. And sometimes they show us, and whatever they show us, there are things about it that are good, and there are also things about it that are bad. So it seems like we kind of want to be having a picture of our planet that's most going to help us to see whatever it is that we need to see. So if somebody maybe thought that the internet is just a terrible thing because it uses up loads of energy, and so we just shouldn't have it, you might want to show them this picture of the planet to remind them that actually the internet is one of the ways that we actually end up being even more connected. The same kind of goes for this picture. You wouldn't want to reduce it down to the fact that the earth just is a tree, but this might be a good thing to show to somebody who is maybe forgetting the fact that the grass and the trees and all of the living things are also part of our planet. So I think it's really important for us to remember that there isn't just one way of looking at our planet, that we are all always switching between different ways of looking at it, and that these different ways of looking at the planet will make us feel different ways about it, and also might sometimes make us behave differently, which is why Midgley thinks we really need to be asking the question of how should we look at our planet? What's the best way that we should be thinking about our planet? So Midgley thinks that if we're going to ask the question, how should we be thinking about anything, the first place that we should really be looking is our history, because the worst thing we could do is to make the exact same mistakes that we've made in the past and then end up none the wiser because we haven't learned from them, or we haven't looked to see how people have done these things before. So I'm going to kind of quickly go through some of the key points in history that Midgley thinks really show how we've looked at the earth before and have kind of really shaped how we're thinking about it now. So I'm going to start with the Greeks and the Romans, not because this is the beginning of history by any stretch of the imagination, or even the beginning of human history. In fact, I think it's really important to remember that we've got like 2,000 or 3,000 years of human history after the Greeks and Romans, but nearly 200,000 years of the same before them. So that's nearly 100 times as long that humans existed before the Greeks as after. So, but obviously we like to look at them because they very conveniently wrote some stuff down for us. So we got here an awesome picture of Gaia, who, or Terra, as the Romans called her, and she is the earth goddess. So the Greeks and the Romans both had a goddess who was specifically just like the earth goddess. And she's one of the pagan gods who eventually ended up being replaced by a belief in the Christian God. So because she's pagan, that doesn't mean that she was Greek or Roman, but I think that's really kind of the name that was given to any of the old gods, a lot of whom were inspired by stuff from nature. So even though, for example, the Vikings didn't have an earth goddess in particular, they had Thor, for example, who has, lightning, and a lot of their other gods and goddesses were also influenced by nature. So that's something that we see quite a lot in, I guess we call them primitive cultures, and like stuff that comes before the Greeks and the Romans. And then if we fast forward 1,300 years, we have in South America, in Peru, the Incas, who are still worshipping something like an earth goddess. They call her Pachamama. And actually today, even today in Peru, people continue to worship Pachamama now. So the idea of the earth as a goddess is something that still exists and has existed throughout the entirety of human history. But while all of this was happening in Peru and in South America, in Europe, we have mostly Christianity. So everyone is a Christian. And if you're a Christian, then you usually believe in heaven and hell. And around the same time that the Incas are happening in Peru and still worshipping Pachamama, in Europe, Dante writes this really, really, really long poem, like so long, where he tries to depict what heaven, earth, and hell are like. So I don't know if you can see, oh, no, this picture here, which I think is kind of cool. But you've got the earth, which is the kind of the big circle that we see here. And then in the middle is where Dante thought hell was. So Dante thought that hell was literally in the middle of the earth. And then outside of the earth, I think you can see up in the corner here, we've got all of the heavenly spheres. So as we get further out, we get closer and closer to God, who's right on the outside circle. So in the middle, we've got earth and then hell in the middle. I don't know about you, but that definitely says to me that in that time, people weren't very big fans of earth. They were so not big fans of it that they thought that hell was literally in the middle of the earth. So that seems pretty upsetting for the earth. So as if that wasn't bad enough, when people thought that hell was in the center of the earth, they also at least thought that the earth was the center of the universe. But in the 1500s, we discover that actually, no, the earth isn't the center of the universe. The sun is in fact the center of our solar system. The universe is even bigger than that. And yeah, and obviously we still kind of feel like the earth has hell in the middle of it. So hell is in the middle of the earth, and it's not the center of the universe, so it's really not that important. So we really don't have the nicest attitude to our planet. And then this leads us into the Enlightenment, or also called the Age of Reason. So as you can kind of hear from the name, during that time, we made a whole lot of progress, particularly in like maths and science. Like the natural sciences in particular did really well. And some of the discoveries we made then, we're still benefiting from now. So there's some amazing stuff that happened there. But sadly, not everything that the Enlightenment thought was necessarily right or good. And one view that they had, which hasn't been very helpful, is that the natural world is just an inert bunch of stuff. It's kind of difficult to understand exactly what that means, but it's kind of basically saying that everything in the natural world is made of just like building blocks, like you make a table out of, for example. And some people even thought that animals were like this. So I want to show you a little clip of a mechanical swan that's in the Bowes Museum, which shows kind of what people thought were happening when animals were moving, when they said that the natural world was just made of stuff. So here we go. I don't know if you can see the water as well that's moving, which is amazing at the bottom there. And then it picks up a fish. There we go. It's a pretty amazing thing, right? So this is made, somebody has made this all out of metal and clockwork. So it's fantastic that someone's managed to make something that's amazing. But sadly, because people were able to make stuff like this, it made them think that the natural world was no more special than this. There was nothing more exciting than this going on. It was just stuff that you put together that worked in some ways. And, you know, we could just use it. We could use the stuff and turn it into whatever we wanted and it would be fine. So we've got kind of these two pictures of the earth then. We've got this older picture with the Greeks and the Romans and the Incas who think she's a goddess and Mother Nature. And then we've got what happened in Europe later down the line with the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, which has led to this very unfortunate picture of the earth as just this stuff that we can use however we like. So the question I want to put to you is, do you think these two different ways of looking at the planet would change our behavior? Like, could you think of behaviors that someone who thought the earth was a goddess would do? Or compare this with the behaviors that someone who thought it was just stuff might do? Or you could just tell me what you think of the different views, or whether you think one was better.
Tom thinks it makes him think of how rude we've been to the earth in the past.
Definitely.
Granted.
I agree, and I think if you think the world's a goddess, then you should be quite kind to it because you think that they're in control of you, maybe.
Definitely. I definitely think there's a respect and a fear and mystery that you get with seeing it as a god. Whereas seeing it as the stuff, it's like, it's not mysterious, it's just stuff, I can do with it like what I like. So Midgley thinks that this idea that the earth is just stuff really had a pretty significant effect. In fact, he thinks it's largely responsible for why we had the Industrial Revolution, or why the Industrial Revolution was something that was able to happen at all. So the Industrial Revolution, as you can see from this big picture here, is when we basically made loads and loads of machines to do the jobs that were done a lot more slowly by human beings. And a lot of these machines were powered by fossil fuels. So a lot of people will look back at history and think the Industrial Revolution is really when we started making a significant difference to we started climate change, basically, very significant, in a much more significant way. This was when our actions started to really have an impact on the natural world. And Midgley thinks if we had continued to think of the world as maybe a goddess, then this might not have happened, because we would have been too scared that something terrible might have happened to have started just burning up whatever we wanted to whenever we wanted to. So Midgley says that we just need a more realistic picture of the way that the earth works. This idea that it's just this stuff for us to use as however we want is just no good. We need something better than this. And this is something which starts to happen with the moon landing. So Midgley thinks that this is a really, really quite important event. And why it's so important, we can kind of see from what this woman, Renee, has said about her experience of it. So she's now a climate change activist who makes lots of documentaries. And this is what she said about the moon landing. She says, in July 1969, I remember watching the landing on a rented black and white TV at home. She said, we realized how fragile and interconnected our tiny Earth is. And in this time, organizations such as Greenpeace, the WWF, and the Club of Rome were founded. The Club of Rome is a group of academics, European academics, who got together and kind of first started to realize that the way we were behaving was going to lead us eventually to some kind of climate disaster. So what I want to ask is, what do you think the link is between realizing that the planet is fragile and interconnected and us having organizations like Greenpeace and the WWF? So these are both trying to help us look after nature, obviously, and the Club of Rome to look into climate change. Like, why do you think that connection has kind of come about? So, yeah.
So I think that kind of that first view of the world kind of lonely on its own in space that we were able to have from that kind of from leaving the Earth made it seem far more like something that we sort of isolated and that we had to care for. Like suddenly realizing we were, you know, this is what we've got, and so sort of that vision, And although for us as humans it feels really vast, actually in the grand scheme of the universe, it's really what we've got. And seeing that it's kind of our collective responsibility, I guess.
Nice. I mean, just look at the image. Like, how does it make you feel to know we live on that? That's literally everything right there. Like everything that we are likely to know or experience ever in our lives. It's kind of mad when you think about it. And yeah, Midgley thinks that really seeing that image like drove home to people, we've really got to do something about this. Like, this is literally what we live on and we need to look after it. So there's this phenomena called the overview effect, which I think can actually go some way to explaining why seeing the Earth from space, even on a black and white TV, had such a profound impact on people. And here's a little video that explains the overview effect. like the fact that it ends with if space tourism ever takes off, but it gives you a view of this amazing phenomena, which I think is super, super cool. So only astronauts can actually experience the overview effect. Unfortunately, you do actually have to see the Earth from space to actually experience the overview effect. But what I think has happened here when people have seen the planet from space on a TV is a much smaller version of the same thing. People have had the same kind of realization. They've had the same realization of, oh, everything is fragile and interconnected, and actually it's my responsibility to try and do something about this. So the research into the overview effect is still ongoing, and there have been a couple of artists, one artist actually in particular, that's made this huge 3D art installation of the Earth to try and incite the overview effect in people. So you can go and they like did a tour of the world at one point, so you go and see it and try and have your own experience of the overview effect. And there are some interviews online. It does seem like it had like something of the effect, but obviously nothing compared with actually seeing the Earth from space. But the fact that seeing the Earth in that way can make people feel not only awe at the planet, but a sense of environmental responsibility, and for them to really appreciate on a deeper level how interconnected we are, is really quite powerful. And it's something that I think we ought to be trying to create in other ways, without obviously sending everybody out on spaceships into space, because that would be excessive, I guess. So another person who was kind of similarly affected by this revelation of, oh my gosh, this is actually our planet and I can see it, is a man called James Lovelock. And he came up with Gaia theory off the back of this. So he was working for NASA, which is pretty cool. And he was trying to figure out if there is life on Earth. So he wanted to know if there had ever been life on Mars or Venus. So he was studying the differences between Mars and Venus and Earth and trying to work out, well, what makes our planet so special? Why have we got life and they don't? And so when he was looking at the differences between the planets, he kind of made this very important discovery that actually Earth's atmosphere, the air that we breathe on our planet, is just as much as part of the planet as the actual planet that we stand on, and that the whole thing, that's the air that we breathe, the rocks and the floor, like the trees all around us, the grass, everything that you could think of on this planet is actually part of this one big system, because all of these different bits work together in the same way that all of your organs work together to keep you alive. So you could think of human beings as being kind of like, I don't know, like your intestines, maybe. Intestines that aren't working very well at the moment because we're not really helping to take care of Gaia very well. So he decided to call the entire Earth and her biosphere that's always working together like this, Gaia. So he's using the name from the Greek Earth goddess that we saw earlier because he wants you to think about the Earth in that way. He thinks it's right for you to have like respect for the planet as a whole, called Gaia, like we would have done way back then, as how we would have felt towards the goddess. And he thinks it's important that we remember that there is a sense in which our planet really is alive. And so this is what leads Midgley to say that the findings of modern science agree much better with the attitudes of supposedly primitive cultures. So she's talking about the Greeks and the Romans and their pagan gods and the Pachamama of the Incas, and also all of the gods that came before that were in some way connected with nature and the natural world, that's an appropriate attitude to have towards the natural world, and that science tells us as much, modern science tells us as much. So we really ought to be trying to revive some of these old ideas in the way that we are looking at the planet. So what's important is that Gaia is a metaphor. It's not meant to be taken literally. James Lovelock didn't discover that the Earth goddess from the Greek and Roman legends actually exists and we all live on her hair, sadly, because that would be really cool. But it's a metaphor. I don't know how many of you have learned about metaphors already at school, maybe a little bit young. Fair enough, fair enough. Well, metaphors are a kind of figurative language, right? So the point of a metaphor is to paint a picture with words. So the idea of Gaia is kind of doing the same thing that all of the pictures that we were looking at in the beginning of the session were doing. It's just showing you a way of looking at the Earth. And it gives us this really convenient way of being able to talk about our planet. So James Lovelock is now able to write this about our planet. He says, like an old lady who has to share her house with a growing and destructive group of teenagers, Gaia grows angry. And if they do not mend their ways, she will evict them. So we can talk about our planet now as though she is this person with her own agenda. Her agenda is to preserve the life of the whole, just like your agenda as a living being is to preserve your life. She wants to preserve the life of everything in the earth. And when one of her organs, like when one of your organs, say, isn't working so well, in this case, one of her organs is us, then she's going to get upset about it. And if let's say it was my stomach that wasn't working very well, and it was starting to really upset me that my stomach wasn't working very well, and I was starting to get very sick, I would go to the doctors and try and get a new stomach. So the same principle kind of applies here. If we're part of Gaia, and if we're not behaving ourselves, then she's going to have to do something about it, because she is Gaia and that's what she does. So Mary Midgley thinks that this is a really cool metaphor. She doesn't want you to think that it's the only way of looking at the earth, or that it's right about everything, or that there's never going to be any other way of talking or looking at the earth that's going to be helpful. But she does think that there is a lot of merit to thinking about the world in this way and using this metaphor in particular. So as we kind of come towards the end, I want to have a look at some other metaphors that we've had for talking about the earth. So one of them is I'm a passenger on the spaceship Earth. So spaceship Earth is another metaphor we hear quite a lot for helping us to think about the planet. And we've got a picture here. I'll make it a bit bigger for you. Or not. That has yeah, there we go. That's also meant to be of a spaceship Earth. This is an art installation piece that was done to try and get people to think about the fact that they might be on a spaceship. What do you think about the metaphor of being on a spaceship? Does that change how you feel about the planet?
Makes it sound a bit more fun.
What do you do on a spaceship though? Can you just do whatever you want?
Tom would be playing video games if he was on a spaceship.
Oh, really? Who would be looking after the spaceship?
Fred.
Well, that's good that someone was looking after the spaceship.
Well, I think I'd have to look after it.
I see. So yeah, this is another metaphor that we can potentially use to try and change how we think about the planet, to really, yeah, try and examine that relationship and think about the best ways to think about it. So there's a cool video here that I think really kind of drives home some of the ways that we can use language to emphasize this, yeah, to try and create the overview effect, basically. So the way that we can use language to communicate what astronauts see when they go out on a spaceship, so that we can have more people feeling this sense of awe, more people feeling this interconnectedness, and more people feeling like they have a responsibility to do something for the planet. So.
From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest. But for us, it's different. Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, Everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization. Every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on the mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam.
I really like that because I think it really, yeah, emphasizes the point. And they're good visuals as well. This is the original photo that inspired what we just watched there. So you can, that's the Earth right there in that little circle. So it literally is a mote of dust suspended on a sunbeam. So finally then, thinking about metaphors, I thought we could do a small activity of trying to come up with a metaphor to describe our planet. So I've obviously given you some examples already. You're more than welcome to borrow those, but if you do, you may best make sure you have a good reason. There doesn't have to be something super serious. It could just be, I think the planet is a pineapple because, as long as you have a good reason, it's all it is. The interesting bit is why you think that is a good way of looking at our Earth. I'll give everybody a couple of minutes. 2 minutes. Is 2 minutes enough? All right, you can have 2 minutes to have a think of a metaphor and then why you've chosen the metaphor. And there's going to be a winner and we're all voting. So good luck.
Yes.
Well, it sounds much better coming from Fred, who's this one here lurking away. But Fred thinks that his metaphor for the world is that it's like a big house because we all live in it, and all the trees and animals and everything live in the house, and we're all sort of one big family.
Oh, I love that. That's so true. We should definitely think of ourselves as being at home with all of the animals and stuff more often.
It would have sounded much cuter coming from Fred though, because it was very nice when he said it.
I bet. I'm sad I missed it. Thank you for your wonderful ideas though, Fred.
I was thinking similar stuff to do with a house. I'm thinking that like instead of it also being like that we own it, that we're like the current custodians of it. We have to care for it and fix that floorboard or the leaky plumbing, so that it's, you know, that we're caring for it for the next generations of people to live in this home.
I like that.
I was going to say that I also wrote down that it's like a home because you have to clear it up, and sometimes you can leave it in a mess for a little bit, but then you have to clear it up at the end.
You always have to deal with the mess eventually.
Exactly that. You can just put it off and put it off, but really you have to do it at some point.
I have to say, Lauren, our house looks remarkably neat this way, but that way, perhaps so much.
That's why I set myself just here.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that looks like a tie then, really, doesn't it? With everyone coming up with the same idea. Have we got anyone left with an idea?
I was just going to say that it's a bit like a pond or a lake or something. It's got lots of things. It's constantly moving. It's got lots of things in it, and everything's made of water effectively.
Mm.
So and it's sort of it can get on with its own way without us, but it's better if we look after it and don't spoil it.
I also like with the water because it's very responsive, right? You just do a little something and then you see the ripples straight away. Yeah, that's nice. Oh wow, well those are great choices and great reasons. That is the extra important bit, having a good reason as to why you think it's a good way of looking at the earth. Well, I guess we could still vote. Are we gonna do, yeah, let's do home versus, was it lake or pond? Raise your hand if you vote, or like, although I don't know if it's very fair, but if everyone just votes for their own, that kind of puts you automatically on the
Oh, you can't vote for your own. That's got to be
well, I guess the people that did home, or is that just you?
Oh, that's true.
I see. Okay.
We'll call it a draw, a woodcraft draw.
That's very magnanimous of you. That's very magnanimous of you. Amazing. Okay, so we're now you all armed with your fabulous metaphors. I can tell you about this awesome young poets competition. So the Women in Parenthesis project, which I'm a part of, is in particular at the moment running a celebration of the life and works of Mary Midgley, who is the philosopher that inspired the majority of this presentation. And so we've made a couple of worksheets actually for children from Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, and Key Stage 3, which are available on the website, which I think Lauren might be able to share if you're interested. That might be a little bit more engaging for the young ones in particular. But basically, we're hoping to have lots of young poets write something based on Mary Midgley's philosophy. So obviously today I've been talking a bit about Gaia and thinking about our planet, but one of the other worksheets is on philosophical plumbing, and like, yeah, anything inspired by those worksheets or by the presentation you saw today. If you'd like to put together a poem, that would be awesome. And hopefully the metaphors we came up with today might be a little bit useful, but we'll be publishing a special collection of poetry by young people in Mary Midgley's name. So if you get writing, you could be in that, which is super exciting. Amazing. Yeah, great. I think that is everything.
Thanks so much, Amber. And that competition that Amber's talking about was one of the weekly challenges last week. So everybody can head over to dreambigathome.uk and look on the weekly challenges tab, and you will find it coming up there.